I'm Felix Levine, and welcome to Unlike Me, where I sit down with fascinating people I have nothing in common with. And we're live.
We're live.
Moritz, thank you so much for coming on. Crazy sequence of events. I've never had 4 cars cancel. Was trying to take a Polaroid. Everything was going wrong, but you know what? Now we're here. I'm happy to have you on the show and ready to get into it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Is there a little tidbit, a little something the world doesn't know about you from what's on the internet?
Yeah, so the thing is, like, with social media influencers, especially in the fashion space, like, we tend to live a lot based on our looks, right?
Right.
Kind of like, to be fair, that's why people follow us, at least to some extent, right? But I have like so many different passions in my life, and I did study psychology, so I majored in psychology, and I feel like a lot of people don't know that about me because a lot of people just know me for like the content I'm doing. I believe they find it inspirational, but there's like kind of a lot more to me that we can get into today if you want to. But I feel like that getting that degree and like just getting that stuff done, not just for myself, but also my family, they really appreciated that, was like a very important step for me, kind of like my self-development journey as well.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I want to get into, to be honest, because, you know, it's someone could look at your Instagram or TikTok or whatever it might be and be like, the guy's good looking, he's ripped, he looks like he lives the most perfect life. And it could, you know, it's not to say that you don't have great aspects and live a great life, but I'm sure that there's a lot more. And I'm curious today to kind of dive into the human being behind all that, because I'm sure it's not as, you know, sunflowers and sunshines all the time. What do you feel like is the biggest misconception, at least from what's on your social media, as to what your day-to-day and reality looks like?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception about social media in general, and I feel like a lot of people have talked about that in the past, might be the fact that it's kind of like the accumulation of the most perfect moments of your life, right? So rather than having a day-to-day experience, people interact with you on a very like perfected basis, where they just see like your most perfect bits, right, from your life. And they don't really see like the type of work that goes into it. And what I realized this year, especially, like I was just alluded to it before when we talked before the podcast, that like this whole traveling, like it's putting a lot of pressure on you, like emotionally and mentally. It's not just a physical aspect. Obviously, if you don't sleep well, you don't feel great. That's like a given, right?
Yeah.
That's how humans function. But then the whole emotional aspect is something I wouldn't say neglected, but I definitely like gave it diminished importance, because I felt like, hey, if I'm like working all the time, I might be happier, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that I actually am happier based on the fact that I work more and I travel more. So I think that's one massive misconception, is that people who work in social media and people who are influencers are more like fulfilled or happy or like actualized than other people are.
When did you start to have this realization that you might not be, you thought working more would make you happy, but in fact, perhaps it didn't?
Yeah. I honestly think that came this year.
Okay.
Because before that, I was still studying, right? So I had like a pretty like, I had this juxtaposition of like working as an influencer and being a model and then studying. And sort of the studying gave me like a great balance, right? Because whenever I was working, I was really focused on that. But then I kind of tapped into like my study mode again, where I was like hyper focused on that and kind of like disregarded the social media aspects a bit. And this like division of like labor in my life gave me a lot of focus and a lot of structure, and I could compartmentalize my brain a lot better. But right now, since that one kind of like fragment of my life fell away because I like graduated, that kind of like caused me to go all in on a social media aspect, which I personally am very passionate about, and I will like push forward and like be successful and grow not only like in the field but also as a person, but like interacting, networking, all that stuff. But it definitely takes a toll in you emotionally, and I realized that sort of like halfway into this year, like maybe around May or something like that, when I was like 4 back-to-back trips. I don't know, I went to like Switzerland, LA, New York, and then back to Europe. So essentially like 3 different time zones in like a span of 1.5 weeks or something like that. And then like sort of everything comes together and you're not sleeping well, you're maybe feeling a bit drained. And one aspect, I just talked to my friend in the car actually about that when I was getting here to the podcast, is something that is very interesting, that more social interactions don't necessarily mean less loneliness. And that's something I realized a lot, because I interact with so many different people all the time. And it's great, it's phenomenal, right? I'm very grateful for it, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm less lonely than other people.
Do you feel like you are a lonely person in general?
Funny enough, like I kind of like conceptualized myself as this like lone wolf character my whole life, Because when I was younger, I was like kind of like this scrawny, like tall kid. Like I was kind of nerdy looking, glasses, played video games. Like we all had that phase sort of, right? But then when I was getting older, I really felt like I could kind of like pull myself up on my own bootstraps and like just work through it and like go to the gym, build muscle, like be successful, work in social media, all that stuff. Like kind of like everything I dreamt of when I was 16. Like if you showed my 16-year-old self like photos of me right now, he would freak out. He would not believe this is a potential reality for the future. So like I'm very proud in that sense, but along with that came sort of like a path in which I didn't really focus on like building great and deep friendships because I was so success driven and success oriented and a very ambitious person. And whenever you're hyper ambitious, you kind of like structure your friendships and your priorities in life based on like performance and outcome. And then there's a lot of stuff suffering next to it, right? Which can be your friendships or like the relationship with your family. Like I really tried to focus more on like actually talking to my parents a lot more recently because I felt like this was something that kind of like drifted away. And I really needed to like get a hold on it again.
So for you, was it more like the actual people and relationships within this industry were kind of fake, or was it more like a you problem where because you were so like looking in one direction, you were almost being inauthentic or kind of like, you know, transactional?
Right. So I think what people tend to do, they always look for flaws outside of themselves, right? Because they always feel like they're doing a great job and then people outside of themselves are kind of the problem. But what I learned sort of like also based on that whole acting journey I went through this summer and like acting classes that actually turned out to be like full on like Freudian psychoanalysis essentially, I realized that you should always start with yourself. Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing that doesn't facilitate proper relationships? And then based on that, you can kind of see, okay, if I change those variables, can I then like sort of like be in a better relationship with my friends or other people I meet? So I always look outside first, and what I inside first. And what I realize is that maybe the way I structure my life and the way I'm so ambitious and like try to reach my goals, like actually led me on a path where I valued not necessarily the wrong things, but I definitely prioritized things that were outside of like human relationships a lot.
What does feeling alone or being lonely look like for you? Because for people it could be a lot of different things, and as you mentioned, right, like you have there's so many moments, especially all these fashion weeks, where you're like surrounded by people and people could think that you're not lonely, but what does it look like for you?
Well, so I kind of call it the loneliness paradox, because in our industry it's like you're never lonely on a like sort of physical.
You're never alone.
Yeah, you're never alone. You're never lonely in a physical space, right? Because there's always people around you. But the relationship, like, that doesn't equate less loneliness in terms of how you feel, right? Because you could be with two people for the entire week. You just see them on 2 days, and they're the most meaningful interactions you have in your entire life. Like, I don't know, your best friend is just like telling you a secret that entirely changes your relationship, and you feel like super, super connected to them, and you really want to support them whatever they're doing. And then you like see 25 people in one day during Fashion Week, and you basically never have any single moment to reflect on what's going on. And I think that's one of the big problems that I ran into, is that I'm so busy all the time, I never really find a moment in which I can reflect. And what that leads to a lot of the cases is essentially that when you then have a moment for yourself where you can just sit down and reflect technically, maybe you're free from, I don't know, 7 p.m. till like 9 p.m. and you have time to like do whatever actually makes you feel good, like, I don't know, stretching, doing yoga, going to the gym or whatever. In those moments, you're then like kind of like rolling back everything that happened in the day and like posting all your social media stories and like maybe getting a call with your manager and like structuring the rest of the night, or like making plans with like friends or business associates and stuff like that. So there's rarely ever a moment where you can truly like just find a moment to reflect on what happened. And so you're kind of like, you're not really living in a sense that you're aware of the present moment and you're present in the moment, but rather a life in which you're kind of like chasing a carrot on a stick.
Do you feel like this feeling you're describing is very, connected to the industry that you're in? Or is this like, I mean, I think this is probably umbrella successful and ambitious people all together. But there's something, at least as an outsider looking into the modeling fashion worlds, it strikes me that there's probably, it's also a byproduct of what those industries really entail.
So I think, once again, I don't want to blame it on an industry. I don't want to blame it on people that work in the industry. I think, first of all, I want to say the fashion industry has endowed me with so many beautiful experiences, so many opportunities. I've met people I wouldn't have even thought to meet ever in my entire life, like the craziest celebrities. And I'm like still grateful to this day. I could literally like sometimes tear up when I think about those like peak moments, peak experiences, because they're just so outstanding and phenomenal. But at the same time, you're right. Like no industry can be entirely good or bad. It's more like, how do you immerse yourself in that industry and what do you make of it, right? And I've heard from a lot of people in my industry, like I feel like I'm relatively stable mentally. Like I'm a pretty like chill guy. I'm like super pragmatic, like typical German, like kind of like engineering dude, right? Like just engineering.
My best friend's German, so you guys are
like we're really
on
it. But yeah, I've heard from a lot of people that maybe are a little bit more inclined to, I don't know, get depressed or like burn out or whatever. They hit that moment at like 21 or 22 where they feel like, wow, this is like almost like a midlife crisis. I don't know what's going on. Like I'm so overwhelmed. And that can last sometimes like even like weeks or months. Like I've seen people just like totally tapping out of it for an entire month or two in the summer, just not posting anything or like not going to any events because they feel like they really need to reconnect with themselves. So I think it's dependent on personality. And like I said, I wouldn't blame the industry, but it's definitely something you have to be aware of when you strive to be successful in this industry.
When did you first get into this world and how old were you?
So I started, I can actually just tell you the story because it's pretty funny. So I graduated from high school in 2016.
Okay.
And then I basically, I worked like as a volunteer in Germany for like half a year. It was not really all that exciting. It was cool. I was glad I did it because it definitely grounds you. Mm-hmm. But then afterwards, I went on a backpacking trip in Australia. So a lot of people from Europe do that, right?
Yep.
So we get like a big backpack. We pack like a bunch of clothes, get a one-way ticket, fly to Australia or New Zealand, and start working there. And that's essentially what I did. So I flew over to New Zealand. This was the first like big experience on my own traveling in a different nation without my parents, like actually staying on site for like a longer duration of time. And then you just have to find those random jobs. So I was working at a factory, like I don't even remember what I did there, but like probably like stacking boxes or something like that. I also worked as a waiter in a cafe, in which I actually met some people from the modeling industry later on. Like I just met my friend Casper here in New York, and he came to that coffee shop when he was like 17. I was 18. We met for the first time. Now we actually met again in New York City like 7 years later, which is super cool. But then I also like I did crazy stuff. So I worked on a farm. Like a lot of people work on farms, like picking vegetables and stuff. But so I met this guy at the Sydney Opera House, and he's like, yeah, I can't really take this job. It's a good job. Like, just take it. It's like a Swedish dude. Like, he seemed like trustworthy, right? Then I said, yeah, sure. Like, I really need cash right now. So I went there. And basically there was no infrastructure. So I had to work there, and like I had to shower with like a garden hose essentially.
Wow.
And I had to sleep like in the cooling room next to vegetables. And it was like super scary because there's so many like very dangerous animals in Australia, like the the ratback spider and stuff like that. Like they're deadly essentially. And there's like stuff just crawling all over the place. Like I love Australia, but it's definitely not like the safest place in terms of animals.
Right.
So I was staying in this like really weird spot and not having like essentially like shower and bathroom and all that stuff. And there was really the moment, I feel like there was certainly a moment where I thought, I will go back, right? I will go back home, and I will kind of leave this country unaccomplished and unfulfilled. But I was so like, I was lonely, I was scared, I missed my mom, my dad, my sister, my family. And that I always go back to the moment. I think this is kind of like the point where my life like could have bifurcated into different paths. And I definitely stayed on sort of like the strong route because I decided, hey, it was a bad experience, but if you give up right now, you leave all those potential opportunities behind. So I decided like to keep on fighting for another job, like find another job. And then as luck will, right, as like life endows you with like luck sometimes, I was scouted by a modeling agency.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did they scout you?
So my friend came over. I kind of like made my own luck, to be fair, because my friend came over from New Zealand, like a guy from a high school in Germany, and he was he bought like a DSLR camera, like a really random like old Canon camera, and he just took some photos of me. He's like, these look really cool. We gotta send them to a modeling agency. But based on the fact that I was like this skinny kid before and didn't have any self-confidence, I was like, this is a preposterous idea. I should never do that, right? But we sent in the photos, and they replied like within like 2 hours or something crazy like that. And they asked me to come in the agency. I signed the papers, and I was like a signed male model at this point.
And so this modeling agency was in
Sydney.
In Sydney.
Yeah.
And then how long did it take you to get your first job after?
Pretty much instantly, because what happened is they send a lot of young boys to Asia, right? So when you're like 17, 18, 19, you have that perfect look for the Asian market. You're like, I don't know, like you're like tall, skinny, good looking, but really youthful, right? Your features are very young looking. And they really like that. And for example, I went to Singapore for my first big trip. So I stayed in Singapore for 3 months, did a bunch of jobs there, and it was super successful. I was so surprised. I was like, you know, a moment when you have like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And it was like the first onset of imposter syndrome in my life, because I'm that kid from Germany who like never really gotten a lot of respect from others. And then I had this horrible experience in Australia where I had to sleep like in the cooling room, like shower with the freaking like garden hose and stuff. And suddenly, boom, I'm on top of like Marina Bay Sands, like the most beautiful futuristic hotel in the world. Like there's, I don't know, there's like billionaires, like model scouts, celebrities, like all over the place. It's so overwhelming, like so many stimuli like flying in from all sides. And I worked well. And this was like the first moment where I actually realized life can be much more simple than you thought it might be.
Yeah, I agree.
If you kind of like take your luck in your both hands, or like work as hard as possible, and like really dedicate yourself towards one specific goal.
I love what you said there too, because I think a lot of people, especially our age, like to overcomplicate things and stress themselves out, I think, too much than what's really merited. So I think that's completely true. Did you at first get like any type of, I mean, you know, if you're a teenage boy and you're starting to get these jobs, and you're a model and you're good looking, all this, like, did it get to your head initially? What do you remember from that time once you started kind of growing?
It's very interesting what you're saying, because if I look back at the people I was staying with back in 2017, none of them made it. 0 people made it. Like none of them is a famous influencer, model, actor, whatever. Like they all work in like regular jobs, which I really respect. But it was definitely not the goal they set themselves back then. They wanted to make in this industry, right? So they might be happy now, and like, I don't know what they're doing. I'm not in touch with a lot of them anymore, but it's really interesting to me that none of those people, those young kids that went to like Asia when they were 18, 19 from all over the world, like US, Australia, Europe, pretty much anywhere, South America, like rarely any of them makes it. And it exactly goes back to what you just said, because it just gets through your head so quickly. Like if you're suddenly like partying with like, I don't know, like celebrities and like famous musicians and whatever, and you really immerse yourself in that nightlife culture, especially I think the nightlife culture in like those big cities, like could be anywhere, could be New York or Singapore or whatever, doesn't matter, Sydney. That's a big problem for young guys, because you basically go in there, there's like promoters that pay everything for you, especially the girls, right? A lot of the promoters pay like big tables, they invite a bunch of girls over, and like it happened in a lot of cases that this became their job. So instead of doing modeling jobs, they just worked throughout the night as a, I don't know, girl in a club, just like working with promoters, which I find very distressing, right? Because you're like 18, 19, not even, sometimes they're like younger than that, and they work the whole night in a club. I don't know, like moving bottles around or whatever. It's like, this is just very sad to me, and I didn't like seeing that type of stuff. So I never really fell into that pit of nightlife that I think brought down a lot of people, because I set myself bigger goals. For me, this was more like a catalyst for whatever could unfold later on, because I saw the opportunity and I was like, okay, now I'm kind of on the right track, but I cannot stop here, because if I stop here, it's a very like non-sustainable short-term journey. And I really want to make it beyond that and like, I don't know, grow my Instagram. I was also like really starting to get involved with Instagram back then, because before that, before I started as an influencer per se, right? Social media people, models use social media rather as like a means to an end to like post modeling photos and get jobs. But for me, it's like I really wanted to show kind of the lifestyle I'm having. I wanted to show more of my personality, because I was just addicted to it. I really love social media, I gotta admit. Like I think there's so many cool sides of it. So I really started enjoying posting on social media and like building friendships on social media, meeting people in real life then. And it's very interesting, like whenever you meet someone on social media for the first time and then you meet them in real life, you click instantly. It's so cool, because it's just pre-categorizing for like certain constituents. For example, I don't know, your age, where you're from, what you work in, and you can, based on that, like just build great friendships. And a lot of my really good friendships started off on social media. Yeah.
Did you grow very quickly, would you say, or was there a specific, I don't know, a post, a campaign, a job that kind of took you to another level?
So if I think about the most significant like external thing that happened in my social media career, it's definitely this funny story. So basically, are you familiar with that new Blake Lively movie? It's called It Ends With Us.
Yeah. My friend is her daughter. Oh,
no way.
Did you meet her? Did you go to the thing?
I went to a premiere. I didn't meet a lot of the cast though.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Pretty cool. So in New York, I went to a school called Beacon Public School.
Yeah.
And then the other really good performing arts school is LaGuardia, and Isabella Ferrer we were kind of like in the same friend groups.
Yeah.
And randomly she's like, I'm Blake Lively's daughter and It Ends With Us. And I'm like, hold on. And I was following from afar and pretty cool. Sorry, side note, but yes, continue.
No, so exactly. So basically I went to the premiere, and before that I was basically being fan cast as one of the characters. So it's this character called Atlas Corrigan.
What is fan cast?
So fan cast means essentially like 3 years ago, I saw random photos popping up on Pinterest, where people like kind of like put me in the role as one of the book characters.
Okay.
So I was the Atlas Corrigan for all like the kind of like the book talk and Pinterest community.
Okay.
And that kind of just it never stopped, because then the rumors came out, they make a movie about it, and it's just like exploded. So I don't know, I gained a bunch of followers just based on that, because people just really saw me as that character.
Crazy.
Right? Yeah.
And so was it like a moment, or like, how does that work? So someone puts you on Pinterest? Like, explain it.
So basically how it works, like I can only sort of analyze it like retrospectively, because back then I also didn't know what was going on, because I was like, who's that? Is that like a Wattpad story? Is that a dark romance thing? I didn't really know what was going on. And then I actually I read I read both the books myself, and then I understood, okay, this is how they like kind of like associated me to the character. I first saw it in Pinterest, then a bunch of reels came out on Instagram. They had like millions of likes. It was crazy. Like, imagine like a random page with 2,000 followers posting a reel. It gets like 2 million likes. And it was just my videos with like a quote from the book, right? And people are like saying like, oh my God, this is our Atlas, whatever. And based on that, it's just like I gained so many followers. And I really respect this community, because I feel like the book talk and like Bookstagram community is so strong, because they're not caring as much about like sort of the media side, the movies and stuff. They really care about the books.
Interesting.
So they'll love them. They're like in love with the books and the writing and the author and the stories. And I think that's such a cool thing, because I do read a lot of books myself, and I know how immersive they can be and how interesting they can be. And oftentimes like a movie is kind of like not living up to the expectations. I think this one's pretty good, by the way. But for example, with like Harry Potter, if you read the books first, like I prefer to have like my own imagination about the characters. I want Harry to look like the way it's.
So you want to read it first before you watch it. Okay.
And then it's more like, it's kind of like a cool add-on to watch a movie.
Would you ever write a book, or have you ever contemplated this?
Yeah, so I have a few ideas of what I want to do, like potentially after within my social media career.
Okay.
Writing is definitely a big one. I mean, a lot of people write autobiographies, which is cool. But I want to write something like, kind of like, sort of going in a self-development, self-help direction, because I also studied psychology. And I really like
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I really like the positive psychology aspect of like helping people and like being able to kind of like put your own experiences into context and sort of like creating a blueprint for others they can follow along that might face similar situations. So this is definitely something I want to do, is like, I don't know, like either like 10 different things I learned from my life, something like that, but kind of like cater more towards like a group that is sort of in accordance with myself. I don't know, like kids who are bullied in school, or like kids who lack self-confidence, stuff like that. Because I feel like there's a lot of self-help stuff that's like pretty generic. So I want to like structure it more in a way that actually help people in a similar situation as me, so they can relate better to the experiences I made.
So were you were bullied when you were younger?
Yeah.
What?
So
like how old and what?
Yeah, I mean, right now I can laugh about it because it's just so funny to me. Because I'm sitting here doing the podcast with you, and they're probably not doing a podcast, having cool experiences. But yeah, so basically it started off when I was so I played in my local football team, like soccer.
Yep.
How you guys call it?
Don't worry, I'm French too, so
You're French?
Yes.
Tu parles français?
Tu parles français?
Ouais.
Ah bah on peut parler en français. Ah mais t'habites à Paris? Enfin,
j'ai habité à Paris.
T'as habité à Paris. Okay.
But my French is not that great.
Okay.
So
That's
let's stick with English. Yeah. So I was basically transferring from like this local football team to a better football team in the city close by where I was living, and it was kind of like, it was like a rough crowd, the team there. Like people were just like, they're so like mean with each other, and like lots of fights like erupted and stuff like that. And it's just this like hardcore, like we gotta perform, we gotta be the best, but also very like strong like cohesion within the group. But then if you're not part of the group, you're an outsider. And I was like the tall, scrawny kid. Like I was like super like typical like German looking, and a lot of people like from my team like I don't know listen to rap music and kind of dress like cool with like tracksuit and stuff. And this was not my vibe. I was like in my freaking like Oxford shirt with my Xbox and my glasses, right? So, and it was also like in kind of like the musical like class, whatever, that like focused on music stuff. So there's a lot of room for like those people to bully me, right? Yeah. And it also didn't work out as well in terms of football, because I was just, if you're not confident and you don't vibe with your teammates, you cannot like put the performance on the pitch, right?
Yeah.
And it was just 1 year of agony, to be honest. It's just like every time I went into the changing room, they made fun of me, like not so much physical, because that would be like horrible, like actually inflicted physical pain, but it's more like emotional pain that was being inflicted. But like every time you already go in there with anxiety, right? Yeah. You already go in there with like the feeling of not being liked, not being respected, and it really puts you down, because the funny thing is you don't want to talk to your parents about it, because you don't want your parents to interfere.
Right.
Kind of like you want to get out of it yourself, and you kind of like internalize a lot of the angst and anxiety, and that's what happened to me. And then luckily I was saved by an injury, because I had a back injury, because I was essentially growing so fast. Like I was like 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", like suddenly like within half a year, like I grew so fast.
And you were how old?
Yeah, and sort of my back like dislocated. So then I had to like stop playing football, because it was essentially caused by those like very rapid movements you need in football.
You were how old?
I was like probably like 15.
Wow.
Like 15, 16.
That's a big 15-year-old.
Yeah. Like super tall, but like so lanky. I have to show you photos afterwards. And that saved me, because the physio I was working with then, like he told me to go to the gym. Like he told me, don't just do it for the girls or like looking good, right? Yeah. Do it for your back. Like you really need that right now. And then I just got obsessed with the gym, and I really loved it, because the first time in my life, I could be the maker of my own destiny. I could actually change something about myself. Like before that, I was very reactive rather than being active, and I just let life happen. And then from this point on, I really just started to like go at it. And once again, it's all about consistency. Like if you look at the patterns, like those guys in modeling never made it because they were not consistent. They were distracted by things. Same thing in the gym. I know like 80% of all the guys in like 11th grade in Germany, they're like 15, 16 years old, started going to the gym. Right now, nobody's going but me in my hometown. Like the gym is there's like just different people. It's not the same people who went back then. So like they're lacking consistency. And the one thing I had was consistency, because whenever I am becoming obsessed with something, I become super fixated on it. And I need to like do it as much as possible, be as successful as possible. And I feel like that sort of like very strong difference from being like super scrawny and being bullied to then being super, super, super confident based on going to the gym. To be fair, it was my only like aspect of confidence was just going to the gym. I feel like, yeah, if I'm stronger than another guy, or if I can have better abs than another guy, like people will value me more. That's like a very like simplistic like explanation, but I still feel like it gave me that baseline confidence I really needed.
Did people end up valuing you more because of that, and or maybe value you more in the ways that you wanted, or was it?
Yeah, I feel like it just gave me a lot of external validation, and I think that
can be dangerous sometimes.
External validation is probably, within the space I'm working in, the most powerful drug. Yeah, you're just getting addicted to it. Like you cannot stop. Once it starts coming in, you need more,
because they're telling you, Moritz, you look so good, your abs look so great, your arms, you're so handsome. Yeah. Is that what you mean by the external validation?
Right. Either that, but then once this started, I was like expanding my needs for external validation, and I was like becoming like very like knowledgeable, and like people told me how smart I was, and like how well I expressed myself and all that stuff, because I really like, I felt like, okay, I kind of like finished that level of the video game in which I have to look good, right, and be tall, because I already did that to some extent. At least, I mean, I'm not saying I'm super good looking, but other people told me, and I got a lot of validation from that. And then I felt like, okay, now I need to tap into a different like market of validation, so to speak. So I started like becoming super obsessed with self-development and like sort of like journaling, reading books, studying. Like one reason why I study psychology as well is like because I really felt like if I can master my body and my mind, I become much more appealing to other people. And I think a lot of the deeply rooted stuff that caused me to make decisions that I made in my life stems from the fact that I didn't get a lot of validation when I was younger.
Do you think that I guess now looking back on it and reflecting, that there were also dangers of constantly searching for that validation, and then also at what point, maybe, and I think for everybody, it's always like a constant journey of searching for that internal validation. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like now you're at a point where you feel validated yourself, or do you still yearn for external validation?
Well, I think to your first point, it definitely, like it never stops, I think. I think you would have to do like a validation rehab almost of being deprived of like external stimuli, because like I said, the world I'm in is like so colorful, so fast-paced, so loud, so like interesting, that the external validation is kind of like the stuff that propels you forward. Because if you don't get it anymore, you feel like, okay, I fell off. Like other people get more validation than I did. That means conclusively that I am less worthy than they are.
Right.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But do you today feel like validated by yourself? Or do you still think it's an ongoing?
I think it's interesting what you're saying, validated by yourself. Validated by yourself is a different thing than validated by other people.
Right.
Validated by yourself means that, at least the way I conceptualize it, that you are in like balance with yourself. You are aligned with yourself, and you're aligned with your own needs and desires and wants. Mm-hmm. And validated by others is more like it's a superficial layer of confidence that you can build upon those external validations. So I think the latter, like the external validation, I seek it probably less often and am less needy for it than I was like 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm still working on the former. Like I feel like the internal validation, sort of like being at peace with yourself, is the hardest thing, especially if you're probably super ambitious too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like, you wake up every morning and you already start from a point of like, hey, if I don't work harder than yesterday, I will not be as good of a man or as good as a person tomorrow.
Right.
And that happens to me a lot too, where I'm just like, yeah, like I have to keep on pushing, because if I don't keep on pushing, I will fall off and other people will replace me. So it's almost this fear of like, I grew up in a small town in Germany, and if I don't work as hard as I did yesterday and keep on improving myself, keep on leveling up, keep on improving my quantitative numbers that speak for my success, whether it's money, social media, I don't know how many connections I have to like influential people, whatever, that equates then to I have to go back to my old life, which I hated so much.
What makes you happy?
What makes me happy? Dude, the simplest question are usually the hardest to answer. It's very, if I just listen to my stomach right now and I just think about what makes me happy and I really try to like get that sensory memory, probably when I'm with a person who I truly love. Yeah.
Have you been in love before?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you currently seeing anybody, or?
I'm like dating, but I'm not necessarily like exclusively seeing one person.
When were you in love? How old were you?
So honestly, the first time I was truly in love was with my ex-girlfriend. Mm-hmm. We met when she was 19, so very young, and I was 22, 23, so I was like 4 years older. And before that, like funny enough, like you're on so many trips, like modeling trips, there's beautiful girls around you all the time, but you're just never able to build that connection, because after 2-3 months, you have to leave for a different destination. So you can never really build that truly meaningful, like super deep connection with someone. So the first time I actually fell in love was during COVID, because COVID actually forced me to like kind of like cross certain like boundaries to see a person. It's like, it's not easy to see someone. You really have to put effort in to see someone. It doesn't come to you. You have to go out and like almost like force it, because yeah, I mean, you're from Paris, are you?
I'm from New York, but half French. My mom's from Paris.
Okay, so, cool. Yeah. So remember when there was when COVID was like at its peak, like in 2020, 2021?
Yeah.
It was like really hard to get into Paris.
Yeah, you had to take like 25 tests and all that.
25 tests, like border controls, whatever.
Yeah.
And so my ex-girlfriend was from Paris, right? Or she's
French girl?
Born and raised. Yeah.
Okay.
French girl. And so I did everything to see her. Like it was like a cheesy rom-com, right? I really did any possible thing I could to see her, because I was like truly in love. Like whenever I was with her, I feel like I could forget anything that was around me, and I could truly be in the present moment. And that's sort of like an ongoing theme when you ask me about happiness is what makes you happy. It's not necessarily just the person I'm with, but the state we're in when we're talking or when we're having an experience together. It's like we're fully in the present moment. Like life, space, time could dissolve around us, and we're still having this super meaningful experience that is deprived of like those external stimuli. It's just you and me. We're interacting. We're having a meaningful, very deep, profound, like almost like transcendental experience. It's like, this moment when you like truly feel connected to someone.
Yeah.
It's like it could be 5 hours that just passed or 5 minutes. You don't know. It's like this almost like psychedelic experience in a sense that you have such a strong connection that nothing matters but the sort of sensory interaction you have with that person.
And if you don't mind me asking, how long was that relationship and when did it end?
So it was about 3 years. It ended last year, November.
Okay.
And I actually never mentioned that to anyone, like on social media.
Oh, did you guys post together? And
yeah, we posted together. Like people will probably know because we stopped posting, but I never actually openly addressed it.
And was it tough, hard? I mean, every breakup is hard, but particularly hard, or
it was
as much as you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, of course. It was very hard because a breakup never unfolds in one day. It unfolds in like multiple weeks, months, or whatever, however long it takes. You can kind of see the signs building up. You try to like save the sort of sinking ship, and then the realization hits. Like before realization is usually denial. And she broke up with me, by the way. I gotta mention that. Like there was a whole story. Like I don't want to get too deep into it, but so she broke up with me, and essentially, instead of having a clean cut, we still kept on like talking for a while afterwards, because we still had that super deep connection. Like I feel like we're each other's first like true love. So that will never dissipate. That will never just go away. It will always stay there with you for the rest of your life. Like your first true love is something like super meaningful. And she was great. I truly loved her. She's like an amazing person. And we're still on good terms right now, which is important to me. But yeah, it kind of like dragged on for a while because neither one of us could make like a clean cut because there were still too many feelings involved.
Right.
And then I feel like around like February, March this year, I felt like, okay, I really built this emotional distance to an extent where I can now say, like, we're truly like not talking, we're broken up, we're doing fine. On each side, like we have our individual lives, we're not as much as like a closed entity, like a shared personality as we were before. Because obviously if you then like also post stuff on social media, like it's not just you conceptualize yourself as a couple, other people see you as that one entity. And that becomes sort of difficult to detach from afterwards, because you're known for like being with that person, and she's known for being with you. And we had so many like crazy viral videos together, and we really pushed each other and build up our social media together. Like I still have that like German boy in Paris in my bio right now, because I just love Paris, and it's like the city of love. I truly believe that still, and it has a big heart, a big place in my heart.
Do you feel fully healed from that breakup?
Yes, I do. So I think it took a while because it was like my first like big breakup. Before that, I had like more like short-term things, never like a long-term experience in terms of a relationship, and that was the first time. So it took me a while to heal, and it took me a lot to sort of like realize the mistakes I was making, because like I said, I always look at myself first. What did I do wrong? But obviously whenever you're like emotionally involved, and it's like super salient emotionally, it's very difficult for you to kind of like judge yourself and say, damn, I really made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that, because you try to be in the right all the time. What
were the best kind of quote unquote healing tactics, or where you found the most closure?
It's a difficult question because it's very individual from person to person, but I think
for you,
what worked out the best for me is not having a clean cut. I think if I had a clean cut and there was no closure, but there was just like, I'm not with you anymore, and you're not with me, and that's it, I would have went crazy. Like I really needed to understand the reasoning behind it. She needed to understand my points. We really needed to talk things out, and we needed to like kind of like detach on good terms, but very gradually rather than instantly.
That's very interesting. Because it's funny, I have a friend who's going through this part's not funny. He's going through a breakup right now, and obviously it sounds like you guys had a much healthier approach. I think here with his ex, there's a lot of toxicity and like wanting to rehash fine details of this, that, and the communication, I think, almost makes it harder. And actually what you're describing too could, to some people, maybe not in your case, sound quite painful, where like, you know, revisiting every day and talking to your ex and having that open line of communication, like kind of delays the moving on process. But it sounds like for you, it helped.
It helped.
Why did it help?
It helped because a lot of people, in my opinion, break up for the wrong reasons.
Okay.
They break up because they either believed in an ideal and this ideal didn't turn out the way they wanted to. Like, for example, a lot of people go and, hey, I want to marry that girl, or hey, I want to have children with that girl. And then if it doesn't work out, they're like devastated, and suddenly, boom, like it doesn't work out the way I wanted to. And like, that's the reason I break up. But it's like almost every relationship, in my opinion, follows like kind of the same patterns. You're like, the first like 2 weeks are just amazing. You're all over that person. You kind of think about anyone else. The first 3 months are similar to that, but maybe a little bit more grounded. And then from like month 6 onwards, I feel like it becomes just a shared human experience. Like you either live together or you're communicating on a daily basis. And that person is not only your romantic or sexual partner, that person is also your life partner. And whenever you have a problem, you call them and they will sort it out for you, hopefully. That's how it's supposed to be, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people are just unable to accept the fact that romantic love will not be as like fiery and strong as in the first 6 months. And they feel like if there's like anything wrong, they rather want to chase those first 6 months again with another person than looking at a long-term situation with that partner you're having right now. So it's always easier to walk away than fix problems. And I think what kind of like why our relationship in the first place was so functional was because we just communicated about everything very openly. Whenever she had a problem, she just told me. Maybe I disagreed, but I still was very, like, I was thoughtful about it and I listened. And I think a lot of people struggle listening, and a lot of people also, like, I was actually listening to this podcast with a couple counselor, and she was saying one of the biggest struggles in communication for couples is they're communicating at different frequencies. Like, for example, me, very rational, straightforward, direct, and then her emotional, maybe a little bit vulnerable. And if she comes to me with a problem, it's like, hey, I don't know, you did something I disagree with and it makes me feel bad. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, I sense your feelings, I want to improve that next time, what can I do? I try to rationalize what I did and try to give her a sort of like pragmatic explanation for what I did.
Right.
And that is a miscommunication, not on a verbal level, but on a sort of like frequency level.
Right.
And if you can never actually find sort of like a way to reconcile those two, a lot of communication will just lead to like destruction of the relationship.
For you, how did the social media affect your relationship?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a very poignant question. I think you nailed it because it definitely is not easy.
Yeah,
it does affect it a lot. And it starts off with, do you want to make it public or not?
Right.
Like right now I'm on the page, hell no, no way. My next relationship, even if I date like super famous celebrity, like actress, whatever, I would probably kindly ask her, hey, let's keep it on like the lower end of like publicity because it's just not healthy. Back then we decided to make it a bit more public, not super public, but I also think like 19-year-old girl is in love for the first time. Of course she likes to like spread the word, share it with her friends, like tell people how great she thinks I am. And similar with me, like I was really infatuated with her, right, as a person, and she was beautiful. So of course I want to show her, and like we want to make content together because that's our job. But right now I truly learned this is the wrong approach, in my opinion. Like you can make it work, but once you open Pandora's box, it's hard to get a genie back in the bottle. Like it's out there, people know about it. It will make things harder if there's a breakup, for example. It will make things harder with jealousy. It will make things harder with, other people spreading bad word about your relationship. So you kind of like provide a lot more attack angles onto the relationship rather than keeping it private, because when you keep it private, like you are your own, like, I don't know, like secrecy. You have your own secrecy, and people cannot really know what's going on the inside. And that makes it easier because then you can just talk things out, the two of you, rather than, like, I don't know, being so involved with other people and they being involved with your relationship. And that just brings about and facilitates, in my opinion, a lot of chaos.
You know, it's interesting. My girlfriend is content creator on social media, influencer. And so, you know, we post a lot of content together. And there was, in the beginning of our relationship, like you talked about, like, do we announce? Do we not announce? And, you know, the conversations are, they're very important, I think, because everybody has a different approach, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was interesting in the beginning. It was like, I think, especially for her brand was a lot about dating and confidence and all that. And so to announce that she was dating somebody was almost a fear of what's my brand going to look like now. And for me, you know, I've always been a very private person, and I was dating someone who was public facing. And so, you know, it's like, but then at the same time, are we going to hide this forever? Like, we want to be able to show the world that, like, you know, our lives, and are we hiding something by not? I think these are all super interesting. That's why I asked you the question. And, you know, I think even for people listening out there right now, whether you have a big following, no following, whatever, I think something that me and Serena, my girlfriend, talk about all the time is, like, if you're going to put it out there, you have to be ready for, you have to have some thick skin, and you have to be like, you have to be ready for, you're exposing yourself, and everybody has an opinion about everything. And I think it's interesting, you know, and I can only imagine her at 19 years old, you are in your very, very early 20s, being in love for the first time, both of you, like, it's terrifying in a lot of ways, you know? And so I think I'm happy that it sounds like you've given yourself grace and learning, and I hope she as well. And, you know, it makes sense that your next relationship, you don't want to go that route. And I understand it, you know? And I think, look, you're still so young and so mature. I think people can understand that. So it's cool to see you reflect, and everybody's different, right?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is, like, very important. Like, reflection and reflecting about your own life and being self-aware is super important. And I rarely meet people who are truly self-aware. A lot of people, they're kind of, like, purposefully pretending to be someone else because they want to optimize for the situation and environment they're in. And I can speak of my own experience. I do that sometimes as well. Right now, I'm kind of like, I'm very unfiltered. Like, I just talk out of my ass, to be honest. But it's great. It's super fun.
But what's interesting, I think, too, even with your brand in general, and I'm just basing it off of what I've seen on socials and all that, it's like, I think you need to get in front of a mic in English. Maybe I'm just biased because of the English. But, like, you have, let me put you this way, and this is a massive compliment, by the way. Like, you have so much more levels, and the ways that you think about things, I think, are extremely high level. And I think we need to be posting more of, like, you front facing, speaking to young men specifically about introspection, thinking about looking inwards first before you look outwards. Like, and I think, I mean, as beautiful as your Instagram is and aesthetically pleasing, I think that, dude, I think you could really inspire a lot of specifically young men in how to be a young man without being toxic. Like, I think now there's, you know, a lot of this, like, weird, like, content on how to be a man, and it's, like, kind of filled with toxicity. And I think it's cool to see another young, you know, I think confident and masculine man, but not toxic masculinity.
I mean, people tend to tell me this all the time when I meet me for the first time. And the reason for why I haven't done it yet, I cannot tell you. It just hasn't happened yet. But
it's okay.
I mean, we, like, after another point I want to make, we can kind of get into, like, what the future may look like, because I do have a lot of ideas, and I think it's a great compliment. I'm really appreciative of that. So thank you for giving me a compliment, because obviously you're a great communicator yourself. And I think you're very good at, like, getting the most out of people and, like, really going in there deep. I think the toxic masculinity is such an interesting point. I really want to get into that, because so yesterday I was coming home from Iceland, and I talked to my, like, whenever I'm in New York or, like, a English speaking city, not so much Paris because my French is not as good, but I always talk to the Uber drivers, right? So yesterday I talked to my Uber driver for like 1 hour 20 because it's taking super long from New York to get back to Brooklyn. I was staying in Brooklyn before. And like we basically went through his entire like dating history and all the mistakes he thought he was making. How can he like sway people to change their opinion about him? And like one interesting thing he was saying that is like really on point for what we're trying to discuss here is he was like 34 years old, right? And so he's like he should be a lot more mature than I am, or like than people like in their mid-20s are. But he was still like looking at sort of the same like inspiration of like pickup artists and stuff like that to like get with girls. So he was saying, yeah, I've been seeing this girl and now she's not talking to me anymore. So maybe I just go on this trip and like posted a lot of other chicks to like impress her. And I was like, dude, you can do that, but listen to me right now very carefully. You're putting an energy out there that will attract the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
If people are responsive to that type of shit, it's not the right person. You don't want to be with that person because that's just such a terrible thing to do, right? You're being purposefully just mean to that girl, right? By like being with other girls in your story and like putting out there how cool you are and how successful and how many girls you can get. And if she's then responding to it, you're already starting the potential relationship from such a bad place.
Right.
So it's like what you should do instead, and that's just my opinion. Maybe other people think this is super highly successful, the thing he tried. But what I would just do is like, I would just like openly talk to her, because the worst thing that can happen is like, yeah, I think you're like awkward, or I don't like you, I don't see myself with you. But at least you have a clear answer. Mm-hmm. Like the worst thing that can happen is being in this like downward spiral of like toxic behavior from both sides, both from the guy and the girl, of like trying to impress each other and not opening up. Like for me, it's like when I go on a date right now, what dates are good for is finding compatibilities, right? Yeah. And if you're just yourself on the first date, not trying to pretend to be someone else, you go there, just like you play it the way you would play with your best buddy. Like you're not holding back, you're just being very generous, polite, whatever. There's certainly rules you should obey to, but if you're just being yourself and the person, the girl or the guy is not responsive to that, hey, then you just move on. Maybe a different person's better for you. And that's my experience. Like so far I've been really lucky, like with almost like any person I was dating, like it worked out just fine. But sometimes I go on dates and it's like, hey, it just doesn't work out the way I wanted to, and it's fine. Like instead of like forcing it or trying to like play those pickup artistry tricks, I just like go ahead and like have like open communication, and if it works out, it's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Question for you when it comes to dating, because you know, I mean, let's call a spade here. Like, I'm sure that there are women that they look at your Instagram, they see you have following, and they see your aesthetic and and there are people that can be infatuated by that. And to some people they might think, wow, well, he must, you know, dating must be super easy for him. But I would probably argue could be also complex at times, because you're intelligent and you have the psychology background, literally. So you're probably trying to filter out who's there for what reasons. Yeah. Have you found it, since you've gotten back into dating, hard to date, you know, with a big platform, or is it okay, you don't really think about that?
Okay, first of all, I want to address something you just said. So when you say you want to filter out who's there for the right reason, you should first say, I want to filter out if I'm there for the right reason. Okay. So because obviously there's going to be like girls or guys that just, I don't know, follow people who are successful and try to like make the most of it, like this whole like gold digger community, whatever. I haven't really like tapped into that, to be fair, because it's not my thing. But, I'm sure there are people out there like that. But it's like, okay, why do I want to date someone right now? Yeah. And what person do I want to date, and why do I want to date this person instead of another person? And you should always ask yourself those questions. Do I want to date this person right now because she's beautiful and because she promises me a lifestyle that I think is like sort of highly desirable for me? Yeah. Or do I want to date that person because I think, hey, she seems cool? Like, this is a different thing. And I think the way you can like kind of assess if other people are in there for the right reason themselves, you can also assess if you're in there for the right reason. And I think if you're too strategic about things, and if you really look at certain constituencies about people's lives and you say, hey, they like kind of like tick all the boxes, that's why I want to date them, it's probably not going to work out.
What are you looking for in a potential partner?
Yeah, good question. I think one biggie is definitely humor. I think humor is super important. It's not just she should laugh about my jokes, which she probably will, because she likes me, hopefully, at least, the person I'm dating. But it's more like, do we like sort of on a humor level vibe at the same frequency? Because I have like a pretty satirical and facetious type of humor. So I'm going hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And if people cannot really handle that, and if I have to hold back a lot, and if I cannot be with her the way I can kind of like be with my guy friends, I wouldn't like that. So I think for me, it's just like being very genuine about humor, and communication is very important. Then obviously there's like levels of attractiveness. Like everyone's attracted to different people. Like it doesn't mean because you're sort of perceived as attractive on like, I don't know, the average of the 21st century means that you are going to find a perfect partner, right? Or that a lot of people find you attractive. It's more like there are people that are attractive on other levels that cannot necessarily be measured on, or like by photos. Like if you look at a photo, the person is gorgeous, just stunning, but then you meet them. And actually, I never believed in that type of stuff because I'm super scientific, but there are certainly energies out there, and you can kind of tap into those energies. And if you feel like that person has a very compatible energy with mine, and I just feel good around that person, and that person feels good around me, it's something you cannot really quantify or measure, but that definitely helps a lot. And I feel like maybe the first date is a bit too early to judge, but I think once you go on the second date and you feel like there's a lot of chemistry, then you should go deeper.
Where have you found I guess some of the people that you've gone on dates with? Is it social media? Is it other ways?
So honestly, this sounds like ridiculous, but I'm kind of like a big proponent of just sliding into DMs.
Yo, honestly, wait, hot take. People like shit on some people that slide into DMs, but at the end of the day, social media is a tool. It's a communication tool, and like shit, shooters shoot. So respect. Continue. Sorry.
Right. So because I'm German, so I'm super pragmatic, right? And I'm very like obsessed with like quantifying things, like measuring things. So like whenever I go out in a bar, right, and I meet a girl, I'm like, it's cool, but I don't really know who she is, and I could go on a date with her. But from my experiences, a lot of times, like when I just meet people in like random places, it usually never works out that well, because there's just certain levels of differences that you have from that person that you cannot really assess prior to the first date. But then when you slide into someone's DMs, unless you're like a crazy person, you slide into hundreds of DMs every day, you probably kind of like pick your people, right? And you look, hey, who do I find interesting, inspiring, attractive? Like, what do they put out there in the world? What type of vibe do they give out? And then it's already like probably like it increases the probability of success by like 80%, just based on the fact that you pick them. If they reply, honestly, like getting them to reply is not always easy, like getting people to reply, because some people are just very averse to sort of like the way of just answering random DMs from random strangers.
Yeah.
And especially if it's like a guy like me with a big following, like I just have wrong intentions written all over my profile. So I think a lot of girls just probably already go in there with the like wrong mindset based on like who's texting them. But I think if you're just charming and you're like, hey, like let's go grab a coffee, whatever, like after like texting for a bit, that's totally cool. And I think that's nothing that should be frowned upon. Honestly, like DMs are like very effective. Obviously, like I have a biased opinion because I have a big social media.
Yeah.
But what I realized, and another hot take here, like sort of like a controversial opinion, huge social media accounts are not always conducive to successful DMing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was on this trip with my friends, and like we talked about dating and DMing and all that stuff, and they're like, yeah, like your account is like almost too scary and off-putting because you have this like perfectionized life and everything looks so clean and properly arranged, and you have a lot of followers, you're on those trips all the time. Like, how am I supposed to like DM someone with like, I don't know, like 800 followers? They will think it's a scam. They will think I want their money, whatever. Like,
how are you supposed to do it?
Yeah, it's impossible. Like the thing with DMs is you're like limiting kind of like the bracket of people that even are like relevant for you or like weirdly accessible, because some of the smaller accounts are like not accessible because it's so off-putting if a big account DMs them. Because so imagine you're a girl, right? And I have, I don't know, like millions of followers or whatever, like 1 million followers. And you are, I don't know, you go to university here in New York, you like just came to the city and you have 800 followers. If I find you pretty, fair, but if I then DM you, what would you think? This is so weird, right?
Yeah. And I can understand.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, girls, guys, whatever, can be very intimidated by that proposition, because also, especially you, where it's like it looks so well put together and everything, and it's a big account. It makes sense that a lot of people are scared.
Yeah.
Like, I don't fall. It's also, there's people that might not understand really what you do to the levels that you do. There's people that, it's intimidating. There's maybe people that have opinion, whatever it is. But where I agree too, though, is like, your person is not going to give a fuck if you have 1, 2, 9, 20 million followers. If the way that you get in front of them is by DMing and eventually making plans to meet in person, and you guys are on the same frequency, who the fuck cares? Followers, 800 to 12 million. You know what I mean?
And I totally agree with you on that point, because for me, like, followers are irrelevant when it comes to dating.
For sure.
Like, I'm way more curious about someone's intellect and someone's personality than their followers. And the only reason why social media people tend to date other social media people is because their lifestyles are like incomprehensibly like weird and like
it's
out
a weird
there
thing.
And like super like different from other people. So there's just so many problems like coming along with it. But I think, in my opinion, like, I could right now date like a quote unquote like, I don't know, like a student here in New York, and I'd be super happy if she's like interesting. She's studying, I don't know, something I'm very passionate about or curious about, like psychology or like physics or whatever, philosophy. There's so many things I'm interested in about people, and if we then vibe on a level that is more than just, I don't know, like just sexual or just the looks, that is fantastic. Like, I take that every day.
Okay, so my girlfriend and I's one of our favorite hobbies is matchmaking.
I love that.
So we'll talk after the show. I have some people in mind.
For me?
For you. I don't know if you can take on some more. Is your roster a little deep right now, or can you?
My roster?
For lack of a better word, roster.
Yeah, no, I will have to check like my Excel sheet that I created with all the people, you know.
I would be so concerned. Talk to me about what's next.
Yeah. So let's do like a short term, medium term, long term. So short term first, I'm here for another, I think, 2 weeks for Fashion Week. I have lots of cool stuff planned. We're doing a collaboration with the NFL, so football, with NFL Germany. I'm very stoked for that. It's going to be really cool. It's like the 100-year anniversary of the New York Giants. I'm going to go to that. Big football fan, not just soccer, so I'm looking forward to that. A bunch of like events, shows. Then I'm heading over to Milano and Paris for the Fashion Week in Europe. And I've been on many fashion weeks. It's still really cool and exciting. So I'm looking forward to it, even though it can be draining because there's lots of appointments and it's very rushed and you never have time to reflect about anything, like I said in the beginning of the show. Then I'd say this is like short-term, medium-term. I definitely want to get more into acting. Yeah. Because I just talked to you about that before the show started, that I just did acting school here in New York right now. The first 3 weeks of August. It was really cool. It was very insightful, and I learned a lot about myself. Actually, a lot of the stuff we talked about today, sort of like looking inward first and reflecting, like being your hardest critic instead of criticizing others. That all stems from the experiences I made in acting school. So definitely want to like tap deeper into that and like maybe go on like a screen acting course as well, because that was very theater based, which is different from screen acting, but it kind of like builds the sort of like baseline foundation and constituents of the method, sort of like the acting method. So that was really cool. I want to do that because I think it just provides a lot of value in my life. And if it turned out to be good, I would definitely do it as a career. If it doesn't turn out to be good, I still made a great like progress in self-development. So it's a win-win situation for me. And I can kind of like integrate it well with social media because it kind of goes hand in hand. Like you benefit from being a better actor when you work in social media or modeling and vice versa, right? So that's on a medium term, and then the long term, we can get back into what we talked about before, like maybe writing, doing a show, doing a podcast, because those are free options that I have right now. Podcasting to me is the most beautiful form of conversation because it's long form, and you can really tap into someone's mind and delve deep into their personality and their consciousness. So that's something I'm very curious about. I like listen to 2-3 hours of podcasts every single day. Wow. Like I'm obsessed with it. Like my phone is just podcast, like never music. I only listen to music in the gym when I really need a boost. But besides, I'm just very like eager to acquire knowledge at all times. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I really like it. Like, this is my first like proper podcast I'm doing, and I'm enjoying it so much. We have
happy.
such a good time.
Yeah.
And you're a great host, by the way.
Thank you, man.
So this could be an option, but what I think and what we kind of learn right now based on like how much time is spent on social media and like Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff, is that long form seems to be this dinosaur in which only a few can survive, right? And then sort of the short form thing, or like the YouTube thing, which is like 10 to 20 minutes, is a lot more appealing to the people that consume like content on their phones and laptops right now. So I used to have a YouTube channel.
I saw.
Yeah,
I was watching some videos
like
earlier.
way back when I was like 21 years old, and I feel like I want to do that again, but with a different framework. So right now, I want to go more into personal development, positive psychology, helping young males and females with their like sort of day-to-day problems and what kind of lessons can be drawn from my life as well, because a lot of people ask me about it, and I think there's value to be provided for sure, and a lot of people would kind of like go deeper with me into my own journey and kind of like derive knowledge for themselves. And then the biggest thing that I kind of like, this is just like a hypothetical idea, but I really like it, is so like my main like fields of interest are philosophy, physics, politics, and psychology. And these are pretty much encapsulating everything that's happening in the natural world. So what I would like to do is have like a show that is basically bringing in famous people, like either actors or musicians or famous pop culture people and scientists, and then bring them together. And they spend like a day together, the scientists taking them to a lab or whatever, or the particle accelerator, wherever they want to go. And they talk about what they do in their day-to-day life and try to explain it and break it down at a very baseline level to the actor or the famous person. And I think a lot of people go through their lives without asking them or ever getting answers to the world's biggest questions, like what's the meaning of life? Where did we come from? Where will we go? What different philosophical approaches are there in the world? What is free will? Do we have free will? And so on. And I think what really helps in this concept that I kind of like envision for myself is that people are obsessed with celebrity culture, and fair play to them. I like celebrities too. A lot of people like them. They're just a great way to gather a lot of people around them. And I think if you have people that are working in an interesting field and trying to answer those like very fundamental questions about the world, nobody would listen to them based on who they are, but they would listen to them based on who the celebrity is. And if you bring those two sides together and create a show that, I don't know, it's like sort of gamified and involves a lot of playful elements, but still brings across the most important message from every field, you provide so much value to people, because you go home from a long work day, you don't want to read like freaking Nietzsche, right?
Yeah.
Before falling asleep. But you can have a philosopher coming in and having a beautiful conversation with like Jake Gyllenhaal, someone like that, or Christian Bale, like a great actor that actually have a deep understanding of their own field and sort of the capacity to like translate it for the regular folk out there. And I think that could be a great idea, because you could just go home from work, watch an episode of that, and learn something instantaneously in a format that's actually fun. So it's more like, I envision like 10 episodes, like each one is an hour, and there's like 10 different fields of study and 10 different celebrities. So that's kind of like my dream for the future, to do something like that.
Why not? Do it.
Yeah.
You could do it 100%. And are you the host?
I'm the host, but I'm also working production. And the last thing that I forgot to mention is what I really want to do as well is short films.
Okay.
That goes hand in hand with acting and social media, because I feel like social media is such a great way to be an individual and to like get across your message as an individual. And what I really want to do is just create those like short movies that kind of like tell a story in 10 minutes or like 5 minutes, and like post it on social media, like really cool, like maybe like even vertical, so it can be used for reels. And I know you do like a love story across like 5 episodes, and like each episode on TikTok is like 1 minute long, or you do like one smaller short movie that's 5 minutes, because you can bring across your aesthetic, your love for film and acting, and also production. Yeah. And you can create your own scripts. Like I have buddies of mine that write scripts. I have like buddies of mine that work in like lighting and filming and stuff like that, and camera work. And you can just bring together a cool crew. I don't know, like do short films. Like this is what I would love to do, and just doing a bit more than just brand deals. Like I do love brand deals, and I do love those trips. They're truly phenomenal. Like the one I was just on in Iceland was just the craziest experience. Like nobody could, like no regular person could ever afford something like that. So I'm so privileged and grateful for going on those trips. But I think I just want to like this is more like a way by which I can earn money, but then I want to use that money to create something like valuable for people, whether that's personal development or short films, just something that I like, but that other people get a lot of value from as well.
I love it. To wrap things up, what's one thing that you really hope people know about you that, or your followers know about you that maybe you've struggled to convey to them?
I'd say that you can be great at one thing. That doesn't mean you cannot be great at other things too. I think just because I'm really good at like, I don't know, like posting photos and creating aesthetic feed doesn't mean I cannot be good at psychology or like knowledge acquisition, communication, whatever. And I feel like a lot of people struggle with understanding that. Like when they, like I said in the beginning, when they look at an account of a famous social media influencer, they think, wow, this guy's beautiful, but he's just beautiful. And it's so hard to reconcile the two. It's so hard to reconcile your personal sort of like convictions, beliefs, and fields of interest with the one thing you're working in, which is like basically looking pretty and being cool and aesthetic.
Right.
And I think that can be taken as a metaphor for other people too. Like you can be the master of so many different fields. Like you don't have to work in one job in your whole life. You can work in multiple jobs. You don't have to be one person your whole life. You can be with multiple people, but it's also fine if you're one person. You can like, I don't know, do multiple sports and like be great at multiple sports. Like I think it's just, we focus so much on like mastering one aspect of our lives that we tend to neglect a lot of other things. And I think for me, like I rather want to have my eggs in multiple baskets than just being really good at one thing, but like, I don't know, neglecting my health or my friendships. And that's what I learned throughout this journey is essentially that you have to be good at multiple things. Otherwise life will punish you at some point because your luck may be running out. But then if you have like sort of like fuel reserves saved up in different other things, like, I don't know, being great at like public speaking or being very strong in a gym and mentally clear and healthy and having a good body. There's just so many aspects to life. And I think we shouldn't limit ourselves to one aspect, but just try to tap into anything that seems interesting to us. And obviously not everyone has the chance to, but I'd just say as like the final words, I'd encourage everyone to explore as much as possible about themselves and give themselves a chance to learn more about the world around them, because we're here for like, I don't know, average of 80 years. And our most precious years are like right now when we're in our like 20s, 30s, 40s.
Right.
So like just make the most of it and be grateful to be alive every day, because you never know when it's going to end. And you also don't know what might happen tomorrow. So right now is always the right moment to be grateful and happy. And whatever tomorrow brings doesn't matter. It's about today and this moment.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Such a pleasure to not only meet you, but also to be able to like hear how you think. And I hope that people listening to this and people that follow you or don't follow you and are learning who you are, I think today really shows a very well-rounded individual. And I think like I'm very confident that whatever it is that your career and personal life kind of iterates to, because as you grow, you're just going to figure it out. You're one of those people, like I'm lucky enough to sit down with very successful and people that are the best in their fields. And ultimately, it's not even about sometimes their skill in that field. It's their ability to adapt and pivot. And I think you have you check every box there. So I'm rooting for you. I'm happy that we got to meet, that we can hopefully hang out while you're here in New York and in the future when you come back. Yeah, man, I think that you've got it all. So I'm really happy to have had you on my show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. I'm so grateful to be here. It was a lot of fun with you today.
Thank you, bro.